Hello, BookTube. It's time for another library tour. This is the second shelf of the tall east wall bookcase, and I make it not only to continue the library tour, but also as a record for any sons and daughters of the race of mankind that might survive and find it in the ruins of bombogenesis destroyed Boston. I'm filming it not only by the fading light of day, but by the fading light of life itself as the city prepares to die. And I was looking through it, and I was looking through this shelf, the shelf we're going to do right now, and it occurred to me that this is also a themed shelf. We had one a little while ago and about John F. Kennedy, and this is another one. There isn't a single book here that isn't a Greek and Roman classic. So you're just going to have to bear with me, or not. Feel free to skip. And despite the fact that it's a normal-sized bookshelf and there are tall books here, there are a couple of transverse books. The first one being a little bit of an oddity. This is the booklet that came along with the audio book, the unfolding cassette tape audio version of the Fagels translation of the Iliad. It was read by Derek Jacobi, and I thought that I would like it, but I don't. I didn't, and I didn't like the experience of anybody reading to me. But this booklet is the Bernard Knox introduction, the long essay that introduces the Fagels Iliad, and that introduction is incredible. And believe it or not, somehow I got rid of the audiobooks long ago. I didn't sell them. I must have given them to somebody, but somehow or other the booklet survives. So every once in a while, when I want to go to one of the subheadings in the essay and read what Knox has to say, reread it, I have this instead of taking down a translation. Although it's the exact same amount of effort, so I don't know why I care. Where are we going to put this? And then there's one other transverse books. It's these old Bob's Merrill books that they were an academic press. They were very low key in terms of visuals. If you can see, this was called Odi et Amo. It's a collection of the poetry of Catullus. And as we saw last time, the last library shelf tour, I am losing my faith in English language translations of Catullus, so this didn't help any. I believe these translations are old and by various hands, and I don't actually know why I have this still. I think it's so small I haven't bothered to put it on a sale pile. But there you have it. Those are the transverse books, and then we get to the books themselves, and this is just a blast of the classics department of your local university, so bear with me. First one is fairly new. This is Peter Green's translation of the Iliad, which is okay. The translation is okay. It could scarcely help but be okay, since he's a lifelong great classical scholar. The real draw is his commentary, which it takes the form of notes and summaries. They are incredible. They are like sitting in on a 5-student seminar with this guy. So I don't know. I hate to say it. I can't really recommend that you buy this as an Iliad, but I definitely recommend it as a borrow from the library for that material, for the secondary material. The translation, where am I going to put these things? The translation itself won't do anything to help you understand why anyone would have bothered to preserve the ancient Greek. And when it comes to classics of ancient Greece and Rome, actually when it comes to any classic in a foreign language, that, I think, is the ultimate litmus test. Not so much metrical or lyrical accuracy as conveying that sense of this was great. If you don't do that, if you don't convey to your English language readers, your monoglot readers, that this book is worth their time, then what does the rest of it mean? But that's going to come up often on this shelf, so let's just plow through. The next one is the Alan Mandelbaum translation of the Aeneid, and this is a trade paperback with all of the really moody illustrations by Barry Moser. And the reason that I have the trade paper, I reinforced it with tape. I like it quite a bit. I like the Mandelbaum Aeneid quite a bit. I like his notes as well. And I love the Barry Moser illustrations. I don't know why. I just do. And the reason that I did this is because the only hardcover edition of the Mandelbaum Aeneid that I've ever been able to find is this monstrous oversized thing that you would never take down and read. Whereas this, I revisit, because I have a sweet tooth for Virgil. I have a sweet tooth for the odd, weird things he was trying to do in that poem. It is usually denigrated as just a knockoff of Homer. The first half being a knockoff of the Odyssey, the second half being a knockoff of the Iliad. But there's a lot more going on than that. Virgil was the smartest person alive in his time in the world, and he poured it all into that book. It started out as a propaganda exercise, but it rapidly metamorphosed into more than that, and everybody knew it. Even the emperor, who had originally sort of gently suggested the idea of a propaganda piece, a long propaganda epic, a national epic for this new Roman Empire, this Pax Romana. Even he, when readings were being done and copies were being passed around Samizdat for various books, he was among those people who thought something very strange is going on here, and it gets stranger as it goes along. And I like it. I like it very much. And then we have, speaking of next we have my favorite book of all time. This is the Alan Mandelbaum translation of Ovid's Metamorphoses, which I got the big, again, weirdly oversized presentation hardcover of this when it first came out, and I read it just to see what Mandelbaum would do with it, and I liked all the things he did with it. And I liked the notes, and I liked the critical apparatus, and I got rid of it. I dropped it like a hot potato, and just waited for the paperback. And then the paperback came out, and I never got around to getting it. I don't know exactly why. Maybe at the time I was living paycheck to paycheck as a bookseller and just couldn't justify the $20 for one book that I already knew backwards and forwards by heart. I don't know. I don't know what the reason was, but then years later, somebody at the bookstore needed help with a paper on Ovid. And of course, everybody at the bookstore knew that my door was always open to help anybody with papers about anything that I could help them with. And I did. I sat down with her and her boyfriend, and we had many good conversations. I not only helped with the paper, pretty sure I got them to read the book, and they gave me their copy. So that has never left the room. That is still here. And then we go from Ovid's Metamorphoses straight to Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is the Golding translation of Ovid's Metamorphoses from 1567. This is the thundering, just fantastic Elizabethan Ovid's Metamorphoses, and the Tudor Ovid, and it's, you of course don't read this for the scholarly apparatus or for the Golding's precise choice of how to render a particular part of the Latin. You go to it for the English. This is amazing English. I don't know how to really summarize it. This and Chapman's Homer, they were a high watermark of the perfect marriage of the greatness of the classical work and the greatness of Tudor English. So I of course have it. Although I mean, this is nice. Who is this? This is Paul Dry Books, whoever that is. I could really do with a Penguin Classic of the Golding Ovid. This is a very, very influential English language translation. I think it would be great as a Penguin Classic. Maybe dig up some academic who knows all there is to know about Golding and the influence of the book, and have them write an introduction, maybe some new notes, and put this in a Penguin Classic. Why can't you? I would like that rather than this, but I'll take it. Then we're right back to the Fagels Iliad, because this is the actual book itself, with the slightly deckled edges and the built-in bookmark and all. I saw this for like 50 cents somewhere and had to have it. Even though the more I reference it, every time a new Iliad comes out, I am on the line somewhere with some editor on some part of the world to review it. And every time I do that, I have a standard procedure, which is to take a few passages, in addition to what I say about the new translation itself, take a few passages from other famous translations and see what the differences are, see what the new translator had in mind, was trying to do. So I find that I need a shelf of different translations of the linchpin classics. So I have this one because it's sold better than anything in modern memory for Homer, but I'm not a big fan of the translation. I think it's clunky, flat-footed, a lot of the time. In terms of what I mentioned of taking it cold and getting an English language only reader to read it and say, well, okay, I understand why this has been around for 3,000 years. I don't think this does it. I think the Bernard Knox introduction does a better job than the translation itself, which certainly can't be said of our next book. This is yet another Iliad. This is Robert Fitzgerald's Iliad with Hans Henry drawings all throughout. And Fitzgerald takes tons of liberties with the original, but always for poetic ends. always for a moment or an image that is wonderful. Might not be in Homer, but it's wonderful. He cuts out a lot. He stretches stuff where he has to. And then you've got Hector on the cover in any kind of Greek, in any kind of Iliad iconography. If you see somebody with a spear through the throat, it's Hector. Poor guy. And this is going to be the kind of thing where a newcomer to the Iliad who's picky might say, well, I want the exact thing. I want as close to the exact original as possible. I don't want somebody's poetic version of it. And that would be a mistake. The closest thing you get to the original is to learn ancient Greek and read the original. Anything else is going to be a translation of one kind or another. And this is, I think, still, pound for pound, my favorite modern English language translation. And then right next to that original hardcover of the Iliad, I have his Odyssey as well. They just go together for me. I love it. I love everything about both of them. They have a kind of a burnish of familiarity with me now too. It's not just a question of the validity of the translations. It's that I've been reading and rereading them for so long that I like them a lot just for that reason. And the little commentaries, there's a tiny amount of editorial commentary that Fitzgerald allows himself to make. And they make you want more. They make me wish for a whole volume of essays on Homer. But his meditation in this hardcover of the Odyssey on when Penelope knows that the stranger in her kingdom, the old man, the hobo that her suitors are making fun of, is her husband in disguise. The meditation that Fitzgerald does on how and when she knows that, and how we might be able to read between the lines and know that, I loved it. I might not agree with every bit of it, but I thought it was thrilling, and I wished for more of it. Especially since, in recent decades, you can't get a translator to shut up in their own version. But that was an earlier day. And then we have another version of the Iliad. Can you believe it? This is by Carol and Alexander, and this was given to me by one of you. Carol, this is vintage classics, but from the UK. It's a lovely thing, and it's got a Gustave Doré engraving on the cover, which is always a way to worm your way into Steve's heart. And it's got the thicker paper stock, so it's a bigger book and yet lighter than the American version. And the American version is also steadfastly ugly in its design. So I got it, and I read it, and I reviewed it, but I didn't keep it. And then I got this. One of you sent this to me. Very nice. And then we have something I've been keeping for a long time. I'm actually holding it on the shelf until I can find a hardcover. A hardcover will show up at the Brattle. I want a hardcover of it, but I haven't got around to doing it. It's the Oxford Book of Classical Verse, and with the French flaps and all. And I have had this thing, God, forever. I don't even know when I got this thing. But it's many different hands, many different translators, many different bits and pieces of many different works. And I love anthologies like that if they're smartly done. And this one is smartly done. I'm just my trade paperback, you can't really tell in this video, but it's when I go a little past the midway point is Horace, and when I get to there, it starts to complain a little. So I'd like a hardcover, and one of them will appear at the Brattle for sure. And then speaking of Horace, this next one is The Essential Horace. This is translated by Burton Raffle, who some of you will know as being the translator of a version of Beowulf that sold like griddle cakes and that was in schools everywhere in the Western world, and that made him what British translators and freelancers used to refer to as a pot of money. And he does this, and it's not very successful. His Horace is an early 20th century British schoolmaster in Leeds, and that doesn't really work too well. I don't actually know why I still have this. There's no such thing, first of all, as the essential Horace. All of Horace is essential. And the second thing, why have it? Why have an English language translation that isn't successful, where you read one of the poems and all you're thinking the whole time is not only, well, I know 5 different translators into English who did a better job than that, but also I could do a better job than that. So I don't actually know what it's doing here, maybe just sentimental reasons. And then we move back to Robert Fagels and back to the Iliad. This is the Fagels Iliad. This lovely thing, the decollage is the built-in bookmark. This also has an introduction by Bernard Knox. This is the third of his trilogy. He did the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. I've never understood why that's considered the Iron Man requisite trilogy for translators. I've never understood why it's assumed that if you can do a really good job translating the Iliad and the Odyssey, you can also must therefore go on to do a really good job translating the Aeneid, when they're completely different worlds. I'm not really sure why that is, except that people seem to think they go together. It's too bad Homer didn't write a third epic. It's too bad people don't consider the Homeric hymns to be on the same level as the Iliad and the Odyssey. Otherwise, the trilogy would be him. But instead, we have the Fagels Aeneid, and it's because the Latin is a little bit more prosaic than the ancient Greek. And since I think Fagels is has a bit of a prosaic turn of mind, this translation I actually like better than the translation of his Homer. So I have it on the shelf. And the next one that we have is another example of that Iron Man classic. Because late in his life, late in his career, Robert Fitzgerald felt compelled to do an Aeneid. I have no idea why. I really don't. I have no idea why. This came out, in the 1990s? No, 1981. And it's good in its way. He does the same thing that he does with his Iliad. Cuts and pastes, stretches, shortens, and adds lots of his own poetic insights. And I like that. I really do. I don't know that I would ever... I would think twice before I would give it to somebody who wanted a first Aeneid. On the plus side, you won't stop reading Fitzgerald. He really knows how to make the verse just sort of rocket along. On the minus side, though, the more you know about the book, the more you're going to maybe think maybe I should try the Mandelbaum. So my advice, unhelpful, has always been try both, because I've never gotten it through my head that the rest of you don't have all the time in the world to read. And then the next one, we go back to a familiar name, with whom I have a bit of a history. This is Peter Green again. This is his Apollonius of Rhodes. This is his Argonautica. This is the epic that Apollonius wrote about Jason and the Argonauts, their adventures, the dreadful Medea, the times that where the crew of the Argo looked like the Justice League, because you had all these people with superpowers. You had two people who can fly. You had one person who had X-ray vision. You had Hercules, who's super strong. You had Orpheus, who could create all kinds of magic with his song. Just everybody, all sorts of abilities, and right at the heart of things, this ordinary man, Jason, who was ruling the whole crew and running the show, in large part based, as Apollonius almost comes right out and says, on the fact that he was gorgeous. I'm not going to argue with that. You better not argue with that. But the key attraction here, and this is a great translation of the Argonautic. It's the only one to have, but the key attraction is the secondary material. It's the notes, the apparatus. It's all fantastic. It's all argumentative and snarky and often funny. So if you're interested in Jason and the Argonauts and you're wondering, because it's had a kind of a crappy translation history. I don't really know why that is, but no one in 2,000 years has ever really considered it an A-list epic, and it is. So, but until this book gives it the treatment that it deserves. So if you're looking for Jason and the Argonauts to read, this is the one. And then we have, I was mentioning an A-list epic. Next we have a decidedly B-list epic. I love it anyway. I love it to pieces. It's what Homer left out. It's the Trojan epic by Quintus of Smyrna. his epic isn't that lovely though. That is a lovely paper. That's why I have this one, because it's exhaustively annotated, which nobody ever does that for Quintus Smyrnaeus. But this is his continuation of Homer's Iliad. Homer's Iliad ends abruptly with King Priam of Troy going to the Greek camp and begging for his son Hector's body back from Achilles, his murderer, and then funeral games for Hector, and that's it. the Trojan War, the Iliad, does not include the 9 years at the beginning of the war, and it also doesn't include the end of the war. It doesn't, and this does. Quintus Smyrnaeus ends the Trojan epic. Here we get a son of Zeus who makes a big splash. Here we get the Amazons arrive on the battlefield, and tons of other things. And this translation is done by a guy named Alan James, and he also does the extremely peppy annotations for it. And before he did this, the version to get was the Loeb Classical Library edition of Quintus Smyrnaeus. And I have have a rather odd and close relationship with the old Loeb Classical Library edition of Quintus Smyrnaeus, and it was also by my side when I was writing Troy War, my version of the Trojan War in the form of a novel. In terms of gorgeous but antique prose periods, I actually recommend that old version if you can find it. But I recommend this one most of all if you want the book, if you want as close as you're ever going to get to the book without being able to read it in the original. This is the one. So those of you who are mythology buffs, and especially Homer buffs, this is the one to have. Then the last thing we have here is another one of those anthologies. And this one I also had in paperback for a long time and just said the Brattle will provide, and it eventually did. And it's a name we know. It's Bernard Knox, who has been on this shelf already. He did this for the Norton. This is the Norton Book of Classical Literature. The Norton, for a while there in the 80s, I think. The late 80s and the early 90s, Norton did a whole bunch of Norton books of, the Norton Book of Sea Literature, the Norton Book of Friendship, the Norton Book of Mourning, and they're all really good. The overseeing editor for the whole thing was Crackerjack and picked really good people, and they did really good work. If you're in a used bookstore or a charity shop of some kind and you see a Norton book of something, if the subject interests you, you are guaranteed a good anthology. And this is a good anthology. It's a great anthology of classical literature. The same thing as the Oxford book. It's all bits and pieces, different hands, different selections, and a long introduction by Bernard Knox that I just love. So I had it in paperback for a long time and just thought, just keep an eye out. It will show up, and it did. And there you have it. That is the second shelf of the tall east wall bookcase, and it is all classics all the time, but it's the only one. After this, there'll be more variety. So just bear with me, and we'll get back to it if I survive bombogenesis. Thank you, BookTube.